Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. Today we have a show that is very dear to our hearts because as educators and also parents, we need to devote ourselves to a new understanding what parenthood is all about. Yes, we say we love our children, love them very much, but parenting is a mission. The Spirit said that to Kardec as well when we want to know more, prepare ourselves. As a friend of ours, Carol Strozneider, once mentioned to us, and very truthful, we go to school and spend a lot of time and money acquiring degrees after degrees, instructions, education about everything. But for parenting, which is quite a mission, and it's not second nature, just some features of it, but not at higher levels, we don't do any course, or we barely think about it. And when it comes to two people educating one child, it may become quite complicated. So that's the reason why Kardec Radio brought here a specialist in the field that can help all of us and matches so much the Spiritist teachings and Kardec's educating mind, Dr. Randy Kael. Dr. Randy Kael from the website terrificparenting.com is a native of Virginia. He obtained his bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology. He went to obtain a master's degree in counseling psychology from James Madison University, and his PhD in psychology is from the State University of New York at Albany. Nowadays, he has a coaching practice as well as a private practice in Clifton Park, New York, where he specializes in working with parents and families. For 2 decades of work with parents and children, he led them to develop Terrific Parenting, which is a set of very relatively simple yet profoundly powerful parenting principles. And you can get to know more about it by contacting him at terrificparenting.com or contacting him directly at 518-383-0600. And here we are also going to provide a Spiritist view on parenting. After all, parenting is a mission. In one of the many questions that Kardec addresses it in the Spirit's book, he asks, question 208. Don't the spirits of the parents exert any influence on their children after birth? And the illuminated minds responded, a very great influence, because, as we have already said, spirits should aid in one another's progress. As it is, the spirits of parents have the mission of developing their children through education. This is a task for them. If they fail to perform it, they will be guilty. Well, maybe we don't want to hear about that, but that's the reality. And Kardec, as a good educator, he proposes, in alliance with the guidance of the good spirits, that parenthood is a mission and an educational mission. But question to all of us, you parent, did you know before being a parent that you would be called in the role of an educator? Probably not. And don't blame yourself for not knowing about it, because society is developing. We're entering higher levels of civilization and awareness in which we will find nowadays courses for parents, and we'll find better and better courses in the future, and we hope through trainings. And Kardec, in comment to question 385, he talks about parenthood. He talks about, in question 685, about the fact that education is a matter of acquiring new habits. But we parents need to be ready as well. We educators need to be ready as well. Are we ready? If not, don't worry. Kardec Radio is here to provide resources, insights, reflections with the Spiritist teachings in alliance with great minds, missionary minds like Dr. Randy Kael. Did you know that Kardec Radio is already in 58 countries? Not only that, but Kardec Radio is being retransmitted every week by a collaborating web radio, very new. Welcome to the club, Bezerra Online Web Radio, Bezerra Online Web Radio, which is a beautiful bilingual Spiritist radio, Spanish and English, webcasting 24/7 directly from Miami, Florida. And they will be also retransmitting Kardec Radio's shows every week, several times, not only the very day we do our shows here live. So, dear listener, are you ready for the show? Because it's going to be beautiful, very intense, and very, very real, because we're going to discuss real issues that parents and educators face every day. So, to kickstart the show, let us listen to this beautiful inspirational message, and we'll be back with you and Dr. Randy Kale.
So. Each heart is like a parcel of spiritual land. Many will be buried by the stones of prejudice at the side of others who got entangled by the thorns of illusion, needing enormous time to break free. However, think about the good land not in use. This is where elements that generate inertia are found. Abandoned lands, orphaned lands, creatures who are anxious for the fertilizer of faith, souls who beg for a modest garden of hope and comfort. These troubled, forgotten lands will often look for you. Your vision will open up through the fatigue of the parents, where pain manifests, tortures, and consumes, through the disillusionment of your sad fellows who carry in their hearts the ashes of their own dreams, through the problems of the child who is consumed by revolt, through the trials of your brothers and sisters who cry smiling so that you may not see the debris of their resentment. If you can already hear the sublime sower proclaiming, "Sow, sow," you know that charity is the sun that sweeps the shadows. You bring within you the gift to sprinkle comfort. You can pronounce the blessed word. You can pour what is left from the purse, transforming the coin in a prayer of joy. You have the strong arm which lifts up the fallen. Your fingers are capable of mending the strings broken by suffering in others' hearts, attuning them to the sound of the fraternal music. You have the privilege of sharing clothes you no longer need with those less fortunate. Nothing hinders you from helping the sick. Nobody prevents you from building in the road the good for those who are here and for those who are to come. Do not deter yourself in the emptiness of the shadows. Plant truth and light, joy and goodness. If you perceive the voice of the sublime sower, you will hear him at each step of the way, confidently saying closer to your ears, "Work while you can, and sow."
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
The International Spiritist Council is organizing and promoting the 7th World Spiritist Congress, which will be held in Havana, Cuba on March 23rd through the 25th of 2013. The Congress theme will be Charity and Spiritual Education in Building a World of Peace. 150 years of the Gospel according to Spiritism. For more information, please visit www.7cem.org.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
This is Nara Venditti with Succeed in America by Packaging Your Brilliance, and thank you for being with us today. Our topic is the most common interview question. Every road to employment leads through the job interview. What is a job interview? An interview is a dialogue during which the applicant convinces the employer that he or she can fulfill the job requirements, solve problems for the employer, and be a good fit for the company. Many things go into a successful interview, but being able to answer the recruiter's questions and convince him or her that you are the best candidate for the job is a huge part of a successful job search. What kind of questions are asked at a job interview? After initial greeting and small talk, the hiring manager will inevitably say, "Tell me about yourself," or "What can you tell me about yourself?" This seems like a simple question, and there should be an easy answer, right? However, you need to practice your answer to this question ahead of time. Here are a couple of points for you to remember. One way to answer is to start with your education and then list job experiences and any relevant personal information. Or you may also start by discussing your most recent relevant job experience and qualities you know are important to succeed in the American workplace. Here's a sample answer for you. I'm a teacher with 5 years experience in, and you say what it is. I'm committed to my students' learning and have a lot of energy. I'm constantly developing my knowledge of, and you say what it is, and have taken additional responsibility for, you list what is that. Then you should talk about your relevant work experience, education, etc. So what are you waiting for? Prepare your own answer to the most common question. Rehearse it, and you are on your way to the job hunting success. And this is Dr. Nara Venditti with Succeed in America by Packaging Your Brilliance. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them in our upcoming shows. Please email me at nara@succeedinamerica.com. That is NARA@SUCCEED in America.com. And again, thank you for listening.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
.com. And thank you for listening.
And now we return to our program.
So, dear listener, here we are with Dr. Randy Kale, and we are very honored with his presence and his expertise to enlighten our minds about how to empower parents so we can raise strong, healthy kids. And you may be asking why we're so interested about it. Well, because it's fundamental for society, and also because we have launched, according to High Spirits Advice, the campaign, I Honor My Parents. It's a time on the earth in which we really need to rescue this fourth commandment of Moses back to our lives that was revived by Jesus Christ and all the great masters in humanity. You can read more about the campaign and also the Declaration of True Civilization by Mentor Joseph at the Spirit Side of Baltimore's website, ssbaltimore.org/campaign, and you get to know more about it. And if you're really, really interested, we hope so, go there and lay out why and how you honor your parents. And you get a wristband written, I honor my parents. There are several centers around the world that are joining the campaign, and we invite you as well, as a person, as a group, as a Spiritist Center, to join the campaign. Right now we are here with Dr. Kale. Dr. Kale, we're so honored to have you here with us. Thank you so much for being on Kardec Radio today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I look forward to our discussion here.
All right. So one of the main things that we are very puzzled is what has happened to current parenting, because people mention that it's such a difficult mission, so extremely demanding. And we often hear parents saying, oh, it's a full-time job. What happened? Because in the past, previous generations, I don't recall people mentioning, not only to myself, I know I'm quite young yet, but either my grandparents or others saying, oh, it's so difficult, so hard. So what happened,
right.
Dr. Cahill?
Well, I think several things happened. They have all pointed us in a direction that makes parenting and our kind of parenting philosophy one that it really creates a world where parents are working harder at their children's happiness than their children are. Parents are working harder at their children's success than parents are. Parents are working harder at daily routines than their kids are. And we see this over and over. This shows up in whether it's battles over homework or battles over getting to bed or picky eating or any of these areas. We see that there's sort of this sense that if my son or daughter is moving toward a moment of unhappiness or they don't like what's happening, I need to prevent that or rescue them from that or save them from that. And the more we head down that path, the more we head down the path of trying to prevent an upset or trying to prevent them from having a moment of unhappiness, kind of like, the model that got promoted, I think, maybe even back starting in the 80s and 90s, was this sort of sense that children are fragile. And that in this fragility sort of model, we then started treating them as if they were fragile, when in fact, the research would suggest completely the opposite. Children are remarkably resilient, and this is not in any way, of course, advocating for creating trying times. It's just that if we want to prepare children for life, if we want them to be independent, responsible, and ready to live life, we have to then make sure that they have the opportunities to learn from experiences that do prepare them for that. I mean, how do children deal with disappointment if we don't give them the opportunity to learn to handle disappointment? If we keep protecting them from that and dancing around that, and that's one of dozens of ways that this sort of overprotecting, kind of thinking of children as fragile and sort of maybe even like overworking, so to speak, to make everything perfect and make everything okay. And no wonder you hear, and I hear it all the time, it's exhausting. And
it's discouraging too, right?
Yes.
It's very discouraging. If you don't have children, it's like, oh my God. But would you say then that we went from one extreme at a point in time in humankind's history in which, for example, if we go to Jesus' time, he said, let the children come, and the symbolic way in which, and very, not only symbolic, it's another whole discussion, I know, but he was the one embracing children, because we know historically, back then, children were worth less than animals because they were a bother and a waste of people's time, because they were, as they report in history, useless for family life purposes, for economical purposes. And then we nowadays are in the very other extreme due to and thanks to science and neuroscience that says, this is a very special time, and if you really sow it correctly and kindly, these can be amazing minds, but we go from one extreme to the other. Is that what you think is also happening?
Well, it certainly seems to be the way of human nature and human behavior. It's as if we move from one end and then we see it's not working, and then we think that the alternative is the opposite. And, this is a great example where it's, that's kind of simplistic thinking, and I think you're right, but it really doesn't allow for that place where children are honored and their spirit and their soul and is nurtured in an environment where the discussions, if we think of that verse from the Bible, and the way I think of it is that when we learn effective ways to manage and handle behavior, our conversations with children, with our kids, are not around getting them to do their homework or to eat the peas on their plate or to get to bed or to cut off the TV. That stuff becomes managed somewhat effortlessly in the flow of daily life. And where we're kind of, what this has produced is a world where the management of daily life and daily routine is so exhausting and so trite. And of course, this is not true in every situation. Nothing's true in every situation. But with most of my coaching clients who come to me and the folks that I'm dealing with, it is clear that the management of daily routine and the things that should be just in the background, handled by sort of my parenting strategy, those things take up so much time that I don't get to have the discussions about what did you learn and what's exciting about this and what did you enjoy about your day, and the real substance of life gets missed. And in that, also this sense to feel connected with our kids in ways that are not about conflict and nagging and reminding and prodding and pushing and arguing, which can consume life very quickly.
So you mentioned the word coaching. So then our question, many of people in our audience have talked to us about the fact that they realize that some form of course on parenting, and as you're saying, coaching should probably help future parents or actual parents to deal with the challenges of being an educator, because we're not born educators, right?
Right, that's right. And if metaphorically we think about what kind of parents are given as a set of tools in their toolbox, depending on what their parents did and what they read and so forth, the tools that are in their parenting toolbox may be somewhat limited. And what coaching does and getting, the right training, it's like if you're trying to put in a nail and all you have is a screwdriver, it's gonna take a long time and it's gonna be frustrating. And as soon as somebody gives you the hammer, then life gets much easier and things move along more quickly. And I think of coaching as really about giving parents the tools to be able to manage behavior. And the cool part, the really amazing thing to me, and I see it over and over again, is I'll have a case come in with a child who may seem and appear to be just absolutely out of control. Maybe there's violence, property destruction. And what is amazing, if parents learn to focus on where they have power, it's like if our focus is on talking to Johnny and thinking that my words are going to have influence with John, it's very likely that I quickly see that I just argue and negotiate, and I try to be reasonable and rational, and I'm thinking my words are actually going to change his behavior. And for the wide majority of challenging children, using words to get a behavior change is pretty worthless. And yet that ends up being where we put our power. We put all of our energy into that. And the bottom line is we can't control our children. If we could, I'd be out of business, first of all. It'd be easy because we just tell them what to do and they would do it. And it doesn't work that way. So if we can kind of change our metaphor, our mental thought about this, so that it's not that we're trying to control our children. Now, what's beautiful is if we surrender controlling our kids, we can then focus on what we do have control over, and that includes my own actions and behavior and how I handle me. It includes everything my child cares about, everything that is of meaning to them. I can control. I can control the TV. I can control the games that are in the house. I can control whether the toy room is locked or open. I can control what's on the dinner plate tonight. I can control whether the car leaves on time to go to the soccer game or not. I mean, I have in those two areas. See, now we can get our power back if we focus on where we actually have power. But if I've got a 3-year-old or a 13-year-old in front of me and they're not listening, and I ratchet up my energy and I try to get forceful with them. The difference between, kind of like David Hawkins talks about, the difference between power and force is really quite a different paradigm. And so if we get in this forceful mode, then it can work for a while, if we can overpower a young toddler, but we quickly see that there's no long-term solution in that. So it is about kind of understanding where do we have power and putting our energy then in my actions and my control over the environment, and then putting our words as sort of distant third as a means to try to manage behavior. So in that way, we stop giving up our energy and all of our power, so to speak, pouring it into a child that we really don't control. And instead we teach them to listen because it's in their interest to listen to us. See, when, kind of the other model can very quickly fall into, if we go hardcore discipline, we can use fear and we can use tactics that kind of threaten children. And then they start to behave only because they're acting out of fear, or they want to keep mom happy or dad from throwing a fit. And that has its limits as well. So much more organic, much more natural, much more easeful is to have children learn that it's in their interest to listen to mom. It's in their interest to eat healthy food. It's in their interest to get to bed. And when we understand how to manage our behavior and the environment, we can teach that, and we can teach it in a matter of weeks, not months or years typically. So
yeah, Dr. Cale, from what you're talking about, we go back to Allan Kardec's comment on education. It's about the acquisition of new habits. So for sure, it's beyond the words. It's mostly about parents' behavior. So in that regard, we'd like to give a short break and come back to ask more questions and continue enlightening ourselves about how to empower parents so we can have strong kids.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now available for purchase, the book Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century by Guy Léon Playfair. This is the first biographical and critical study in English of one of the outstanding mediums of all time, through whom more than 450 books were received by automatic writing over a 70-year period, few of which until recently were available in English translations. Purchase your copy today at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live. Evolution in Two Worlds. A journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone, the online study of the Spirit's Book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. Spiritism for Everyone meets every Wednesday evening and Saturday morning using the latest technology in web conferencing. You can join in from any computer in the comfort of your home or office, no matter where you are in the U.S. or the world. Spiritism for Everyone is open, free, and requires no registration. To access the web live meetings, go to www.spiritus.us. Spiritism for Everyone is a program of the United States Spiritist Council.
And now we return to our program.
Dr. Cale, do you think we could prevent so many of these problems before we have children by thinking the following question? What are the reasons why you want a child? Because what I often see are people coming and saying, I want a child because it's so cute. They think it's a doll or a toy because it's cute. And then others say, oh, because I feel this emptiness in my life, or because, oh, we got married, it's just so natural to fall into having children. And others because they say, it's a certificate of maturity. Well, when I have my child, I feel more an adult. And others, unfortunately, they mention, I want to have children because the day I get older, I want to make sure somebody's going to take care of me. Do you think these explanations, these reasons, or others would also be recipe for failure or problems?
Well, they definitely would be because, the motivation is so, such a sort of immature motivation, so to speak. It's kind of self-serving and all about me. And in there's no thought given to, what's my mission in life and what's going to be our mission and goal as a family? What's the purpose in doing this that meets some higher purpose other than just taking care of me when I get old and sick? So, that's not particularly fulfilling for children to know that that's why they were brought into the world. So I think it is a setup. And at the same time, I would say even for parents who have a more well thought out intention, when they get caught up in sort of the rhythm of daily life that is thrust upon them by communities, kids being involved in multiple sports, multiple activities, and there's this sort of harried lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And I just had a teacher and a lawyer in my office last week. They're great parents. They're well-intentioned parents, and they're talking about this lifestyle where they didn't pause to kind of reflect on, I think, where your questions are pointing, which is, what do we really want our children to remember? What do we want to create? How do we want to make a difference here? And those sort of questions that determine, in part, what I can say yes to and what I can say no to. If I don't have a clear barometer, a sort of internal or family-based purpose or mission statement, I don't know what to say no to. And life will, by the nature of the way it's going right now, just keep giving you more and more and more and more, and kids say yes more and more. And there's this routine for sort of upper middle class sort of families that are really driven to have their kid to do more and get it the most out of life. And yet that may end up just creating a lifestyle where, they're going from place to place, constantly sitting on the sidelines, watching their children, and yet there's very little engagement with children other than around the management of the routine. I just see it as it becomes a very empty lifestyle, and that's what you hear and see over and over again, because the more that you do that for a lot of kids, because you're constantly doing for them, they're really trained to believe that's mom's job, that's dad's job to do for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then they end up, as pre-adolescents to adolescents, they grow into this sort of entitlement, spoiled, sort of bossing their parents around that is just disheartening. And disheartening to parents because they don't understand it, and it's disheartening on the outside of that, because you see a trajectory for their lives then that sets them up for a lot of disappointment, sets the children up for a lot of disappointment, frustration, not really being able to reach their potential, so to speak.
Exactly, and as you're saying, I recollect weird things that are happening with the new generation, which is, for example, the other day I was in a supermarket here, and then this lady had, the child was like 3 years old, 4 years old, and then the mom was like, well, you choose what you want from this aisle, this side of the aisle, and I'll keep choosing from this side. Choose what you want. I'm like, she doesn't even know how to read. And then the other day when we were in a Spiritist trip in London, we stopped by at a bakery. I'm just showing the transcultural aspect of it. And I saw a similar thing, but worse than that, because this was a toddler. By the bakery setting, the mom approached the toddler and said, you can choose which sweet you want, and then we'll will have whatever you want for you. I'm like, in which world are we? Because it seems that they don't know yet. Food is not a toy. No wonder we have so much obesity, because they think food is for pleasure, and food can be also medicine. Neuroscience shows it can be a true drug for the brain. You can change your whole attitude, and parents are not aware of it. They are just like playing dollhouse.
That's a pointer to me, Vanessa. It's a huge pointer about understanding the difference between a toddler being given a toddler-level, developmentally appropriate choice, i.e., for example, what toy do you want to play with? Well, that's a good toddler choice, but what's healthy for a toddler is not a healthy choice. That's a parent's decision. And you see this over and over again, where this idea of giving kids choices, what parents are doing, they're surrendering their responsibility and giving it to children. And then what happens is it looks like most children kind of take it on, and it looks like what they want. But yet, the more you give them choice, the more you give them the opportunity to choose what they want to eat, what they want to play with when they go to bed, the more you give them that choice, the more unhappy they become and the more demanding they become. There is no formula there for happiness for kids. And you see this over and over and over again. In part because if we look through the years from toddler to teen to adult, we see over and over again that happiness doesn't come to us by living an abandoned lifestyle where we do whatever we want in the moment. We acquire certain disciplines of exercise, disciplines of food, sleep, getting up, spiritual practice, whatever those disciplines are. We put those in place, and those create a structure that allows us then to if we are in a more contemplative mode, we are observing the mind and what the mind does. But if we're in a learning mode, the mind has the opportunity to thrive more. But if we look at what situations, what environments allow children to thrive, it is not this environment where there's complete abandon and they get to choose anything. It really doesn't work well that way. And so that point, that situation you described, we see that over and over again. Parents asking kids what they want for dinner. What do you want to watch? And then as children get older, they want to watch more and more mature things or more violent shows. And I recently did a forensic evaluation for the court, and the child that I interviewed was a 5-year-old boy. The parents were separated, but was playing a video game called Call of Duty.
God, that's really something that is disturbing so many families. I'm so impressed.
It's just so frustrating because he's a behaviorally challenging child, and both parents are struggling, and to allow that to happen and kind of not see the obvious need for it. This is a realm where just because he moved to wanting more and more violent games doesn't mean that that's what's good for a child. A child who wants to eat more donuts doesn't mean that's what's good for the child. A child who wants to play more than complete their homework when they're in 5th grade, we can't just give them those opportunities to choose what they want, because they're going to choose what is impulsively, in the moment, most gratifying. If it's eating, that's going to be sweets and simple carbohydrates. If it's work versus play, they're going to choose to play. If it's a evolving little boy, if you give them the choice of an aggressive versus a non-aggressive game, they will tend to move toward more aggressive games. So those are arenas where we have to step in, understand the difference between the decisions that rest on our shoulders as parents and what belongs in a child's world as a developmentally appropriate areas of choice. Or otherwise it spirals out of control. It really does.
Yeah, Dr. Kale, this is a very hot topic for us, and I bet the parents who are listening to ourselves now, they're really feeling more empowered because you're clarifying a lot of doubts. And of course, we want to remind them if they want to ask you questions, please email kardecradio@gmail.com or kardec@kardecradio.com, and we'll be providing you with the answers. So right now we go to another break, and we'll be right back with you.
We will return to our program after these messages.
For the first time ever, the book Between Heaven and Earth by the spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is now in English. This is a novel that offers information about the relationship that exists in the activities of the spirit on the two planes of life. Purchase your copy today at www.edysayofamerica.com.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.edysayofamerica.com today. The International Spiritist Council is organizing and promoting the 7th World Spiritist Congress, which will be held in Havana, Cuba on March 23rd through the 25th of 2013. The Congress theme will be Charity and Spiritual Education in Building a World of Peace. 150 years of the Gospel according to Spiritism. For more information, please visit www.7cem.org.
And now we return to our program.
Dr. Cale, you've been working on this for a while. Have you observed that this new generation is quite different from previous ones?
Well, in the last two generations, as a more, let's call it a more indulging, taking care of, catering to philosophy has emerged. You see more and more of the consequence of that. We see academically that as a whole, our students are performing worse year by year. It's not an arguable issue. It just continues to deteriorate. And we see that if we look at the process of how is that happening, we see that more and more time is spent engaging in extracurricular activities and keeping children, particularly, there's sort of a bifurcation, a sort of splitting of society. There's the sort of hyperactive portion, a lot of parents working extremely hard, kids involved in many, many activities. And then there's another sort of branch where parents are sort of overwhelmed with the demands of life. They're working 3 jobs, single parents, and kids are given no structure and no routine. And so we have these sort of 2 different paths, and neither of them are producing. And again, I hate to use that sort of terminology, but the result and the consequence is that you see more and more of an impulsive need to get what I want in the moment. And to say what I want, and to react on any thought that happens to arise. And that takes the form then of disrespect. It takes the form of, I'm not going to work for $10 an hour because kids haven't been taught the value of money. So if if children are given a $300 electronic device for Christmas, and they don't. Then when they go out in the world and they're starting to earn money and they realize, I'd have to work 2 weeks of part-time work to replace my iPod that I was carelessly kind of paying attention to. You see, they don't have that sort of relationship between effort and the result of effort is completely lacking. And so yes, I do see this sort of deterioration, and it's not all doom and gloom. Because we're kind of talking about, and the population of folks that I work with, for example, are folks that are struggling, as opposed to folks that are thriving. There are certainly lots of families who are doing this well, who are thriving, who really get the need for structure, the importance a discipline system that is not punitive but is based upon kind of understanding the principles of psychology, neuroscience, as you would talk about it, the role of healthy food and healthy routines. There are plenty of folks who get it. It's just that proportionately it seems to be, and the data would tend to point in that direction, that that's a smaller and smaller proportional part of the population.
So, Dr. Caire, as you're talking about the discipline, you're talking about a new concept that is away from punishment. It's about structure. So, when we talk about parents, they have difficult children because they are spoiled, they have their tantrums, and as we've mentioned to you before, it seems like parents became slaves of their own children, and they feel it's so hard to put limits. What do you usually recommend as general tips besides the need of receiving a whole coaching on it? What would you recommend? What are also your materials that you would provide to help parents in that regard and understand that discipline is needed and it doesn't have anything to do with harsh punishment or violence or any of those things?
Well, good question. On my website at Terrific Parenting, I have a number of products that are and solutions, as well as lots of articles about specific topics. For example, whether it's temper tantrums or whining or picky eating or kids fighting in the car, very specific solutions. Because a lot of times there's one area that's really the source of most pain. But I also have a sort of home study course that provides an overview of all the principles and is a little bit of a lengthier process. Usually parents work their way through it over the course of 6 to 8 weeks. And in that, there's a whole comprehensive approach given. So depending upon what the issue is, the tips might be, the same principles are used, but the actual implementation might be a bit different. But if in the way that you introduced the question, if we think about structure, for example, and you had made the comment that a lot of times parents are finding it difficult to set limits. Well, my suspicion there is that it's difficult to set limits, first because we haven't done it in the past. So therefore, when we set limits, kids fight back. They resist. They yell, they scream, they tantrum, they complain, they whine. They make our lives miserable, and we don't know what to do with that. We don't know what to do with that misery. We try to tell them to stop. We try to get rid of it. We try to walk away from it, and then it just follows us. And I use this metaphor a lot in my teaching. In fact, it's the core of what begins to make sort of common sense parenting work. You know what I mean? Sort of the way you might think of consequences, and some you might think of as old school, and some you might think of as new school. But those typical strategies will begin to work if we honor one primary set of principles, and I call it weeds to seeds. And so if we think of weeds as all the negative behavior, whining, complaining, talking back, tantruming, negativity, you notice that the overwhelming tendency is now that when a weed shows up at home, my son's whining or he's complaining or he's talking back or being disrespectful, the overwhelming tendency is that I feed into that. I feed the weed. I often encourage parents to think of themselves and their attention as energy that's like water to the weed. And so every time you turn to the whiny child, the child who's showing lots of drama, lots of negativity or complaints, every time you turn, start to speak, give a look, engage, negotiate, soothe even, any of those times that we're giving energy to those negative behaviors, we're feeding the weed. And the law of the universe really says, and you know this from the neuroscience studies as well, probably the most proven principle on the planet is that if we consistently give energy to something, it's going to grow. And so if we give energy to negativity, disrespect, whiny, complaining behavior, what happens is the weed kind of grows out of control. So a lot of what parents are struggling with has to do with engaging and feeding into the weed. And so literally, I say literally because I have to keep telling parents, 2-3 coaching sessions typically, remind them this is a very concrete thing. Because if you start, it would say habitually, for a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old, you've been responding to their negative behavior, the weed, so to speak. When you start to walk away, and you do want to start to walk away, it's step one in the process. You're going to find that the weed is not going to be happy. The weed is going to follow you. The weed is going to scream and make a fit. That typically things get worse before they get better. And so we have to be prepared mentally, psychologically, and really spiritually we have to be prepared to allow our children to go through this upset that they're going to go through, because we're literally going to reprogram their brain so that in response to moving to that negative state, to that whiny, dramatic, emotional reaction, I often say that our children can't walk away from negative behavior until we can walk away from it.
That's very
It's kind of like it's kind of like a gem that parents want to hold on to. If we can walk away, they can learn to walk away. But we have to be able to do that for a while, meaning, for a young child, and if you're at home with them, a toddler, 4 or 5-year-old, and you start to disengage from these negative moments, you'll probably have 2 or 3 very tough days, and then things get better very quickly. If it's a 10-year-old or 12-year-old, you've got there's more of a price you're going to pay. You've got a week or 2 weeks likely that you're going to have to be diligent in your ability to disengage, even though your child escalates their behavior. And there's some other pieces that come to that, but so the first step is we starve weeds. And the corollary, and the opposite side of the coin, is we have to learn how to feed seeds, the seeds of success, happiness, hard work, effort, responsibility, all the good stuff.
Yeah, and as you're talking about escalating, we often hear, as we go from children to teenagers, some parents say, or many of them, oh my God, my child was great, now look at my teenager, I don't recognize him or her, they're completely different people. What happened there? Besides the physiological part of it, we know that plays a huge role. The spiritual part of it, I think at least our audience will talk about in some of the segments in between the interview about the spiritual aspect of it. But is it possible, Dr. Cahill, based on your experience and your studies, that these parents probably missed the boat? As you're talking about weeds, probably there was a weed there that they didn't pay attention to, and it just grew.
Absolutely. Most of those parents have the sense, as their kids are getting older, that they're having to work harder and harder to hold things together. But if the child is not oppositionally inclined by nature, if they're not a particularly difficult child, and so as they're getting older, mom and dad, or perhaps are both working harder and harder to keep things rolling, to keep things moving, and then those adolescent years, kind of kick in. I encourage parents to think of it this way. It's like children, it's like they begin to push away, and if parents can imagine their kids kind of taking both hands and pushing away from mom and dad, as they push away with whatever habits they own, not the habits that mom and dad are forcing upon them, not the habits that mom and dad are managing constantly. They push away and they retain the habits that they have actually acquired themselves. And so you can almost always, not 100% of the time, but almost always, you see that when you hear parents with that description, you can look back and you can see where the kids just pushed away, and they retained the habits that were theirs, and the other habits you can no longer force upon them. So often that's what's happening in those situations. So yeah, there is a weed growing, and parents have been dancing around it, and there's this sense of just working harder and harder and harder, and then there's eventually a time where you just can't work hard enough to juggle or hold all the pieces together.
Yeah, Dr. Cahill, as you're speaking, and I recall question and answer 385 of the Spirit's book, when Allan Kardec, as a great educator, he asked the illuminated spirits as well, what is the reason for the change that occurs in the character of people at a certain age, especially in adolescence? Is the spirit that changes? And the answer is quite fascinating because it complements so much what you're saying to us. It is because the spirit recaptures its true nature and reveals who he really is prior to this present reincarnation. You do not know the secrets that children conceal behind their innocence. You do not know what they are, what they have been, or what they will be. Nevertheless, you love and cherish them as though they were a part of you. Well, there is a lot for us to meditate and reflect, and now we need to give another break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Randy Cahill.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Enjoy this new release, Reborn for Love, by the renowned Brazilian scientist and researcher on reincarnation, Dr. Hernani Andrade. This novel describes one of the most extraordinary and genuine cases of reincarnation ever studied by Dr. Andrade's Brazilian Institute of Psychobiophysics Research in Sao Paulo State. Order your copy now at roundtable.uk@gmail.com or at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Want to find a good way to explain life after physical death to kids or teenagers? Check out the book Message from a Teen in the Spirit World by the Spirit Neo Lucio and psychographed by Chico Xavier. In this book, a teenager named Carlos explains his impressions on the new life in the spirit realm with his discarnate relatives and new friends. Purchase your copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org.
The Spiritist Magazine is a trimestral, digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
In the book, A Primer on Being Good by the Spirit May, psychographed by the medium Chico Xavier, explains in simple language appropriate for children two paths in life, the path of good or the path of evil. God has granted us the freedom to choose either one. Purchase your copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Now we return to our program.
Dr. Cahill, in your coaching program for parents, do you also teach them to recognize what we could call like little careless moments in their educational skills that can generate great problems in adolescence? Do you also provide insight in that regard?
Absolutely. That the key is in our conversation, a lot of this is about sort of philosophy and approaches and ways to begin to think about it, as opposed to getting down to the sort of nitty-gritty. How does that translate then to how we manage structure and how we manage routine? Because if you think about some of our opening comments when I was talking about where do we have power? Do we have power if we focus on trying to control our children, or do we have more power if we focus on my behavior and management of the environment? Well, that management of the environment is one of the ways that we begin to exert tremendous influence over daily routines and over kind of the management of and getting them to accomplish, I guess, the things that we'd like for them to accomplish. For example, one of the things that is a sort of foundation that I build morning routines, afternoon routines, dinner routines, Saturday, Sunday, is around a very simple concept I call work then play. And work then play basically says to your kids, sweetheart, here's the deal. From now on, when you get home, you're gonna do your homework, and I'm going to inspect it to make sure it's up to your potential. And then you've got a couple responsibilities. They aren't going to take long, but each day we'll have them mapped out, and you already have predetermined what the responsibilities are. And once you've finished that, then you can play. And the difference is, and here's what really makes this come to life, the difference is really three things can happen. One is there's a predetermined way that my wisdom as a parent has shown up, and I've informed the family, the children, that I understand what's best for them. I know that in the world of successful students, successful teenagers, successful college students, and adults, you do your work first, and then you reap the benefits after. It's like one of those rules of life. Secondly, it allows me to shift my focus from trying to force them to do their work to leveraging control of the goodies. In other words, I say, you can take an hour to do your homework, you can take 5 hours to do your homework, but you don't get to the goodies until the work is done. So rather than focusing on trying to help them through or to encourage them to get through or to, make sure they get it done, I focus on making sure that they can't get to the goodies until they show me the work. Now that for a lot of parents is a huge paradigm shift.
But Dr. Taylor, let me interrupt you, because what you are recommending seems so important, at the same time the rationale behind it so logical. It has so much common sense, but I've seen parents, one of them proposing that, whereas the other one is like, oh, but that's so hard for them or for him or for her. Aren't we being too hard on them? Come on, let them play a little bit, then they go back to their homework. So then you destroy the whole proposal.
You destroy the whole proposal, exactly. The need for parents to be on the same page and to, I often say to parents when I'm speaking to audiences, I encourage them to not believe anyone, including me, like to not believe me, but to test it. And the beauty is in the results. And if we take that philosophy and we watch how it unfolds over time, we see that this is not a philosophy that for most kids will produce long-term success. If you happen to have a child who's unreasonably bright and capable, and therefore in the early years homework takes them a short period of time, and they can sit down after dinner and in 10 minutes they're done. The problem is it doesn't look like a real problem is happening, but the habit that's being developed is not a habit that's going to sustain them when school starts to pour it on a little more. We see this more and more with high school students who are up till 12:30, 1 o'clock, 1:30, because they insist upon playing until the world kind of shuts down, and then they start studying at 10:30 at night. And studies show high school students, by and large, are doing their homework late at night, sleep deprived, often texting and Facebooking in the middle of it.
That's pretty challenging. To be a teenager today, we recognize it's very tricky too. We understand that they need, right? It's very difficult because you're exposed to so much and you have to make choices. You have so much stimuli all around that life becomes very complex. We lost the simplicity of living. And we are not against technology or anything, but how to deal with this exposure in a healthy way. What do you usually recommend parents?
Well, again, I think the tendency is to want to make it more complex than what it is. And if we look at trying to manage every single little aspect, it actually does become a little bit overwhelming. But and so it's why I encourage a philosophy that is simple and kind of teaches children from an early stage. For example, that they don't wake up in the morning with a right to have access to every gadget and every toy and every electronic device on the planet. We see that most teenagers, or many, wake up with that presumption. They should have a cell phone. I don't see it that way. I see it as something that comes with responsible behavior. And so the more that life is set up so that, this sort of work-play philosophy, for example, you see kind of becomes ingrained in kids where they understand they have to take care of their responsibilities. And if they do, then mom and dad are pretty much yes parents. We like to say yes to a lot of things. And at the same time, that sort of philosophy teaches a pre-adolescent or an adolescent that the goodies still are within mom and dad's control, and they are monitored and observed. I do not, in today's world, because I've seen it, you've probably seen it, I have the real-life situations. Just a couple months ago, a mom who happened to be homesick turns on the computer, and her son had been on a chat, and she found it suspicious, and then continued to play the son's role and ended up setting up an FBI sting. The perpetrator ended up coming to her home a few days later, and her son was absolutely innocent and kind of naive 13-year-old, and so the discretion is not there if we don't put it there. I think of it as, if you give children, adolescents, untethered access to the internet, well, there's a lot of wonderful tools there, but everything that's on the light is on the dark side. I mean, the equally opposite is available, and so I think we have to be clear with kids that we are monitoring and we're watching, and you understand that when you move out of the house and you have your own gadgets, that you'll be able to do that, but. So we build into our computers and to our systems, we build in a way to just keep an eye on things, and they grow up with that understanding, and they may think it should be different, but as long as it's there from the get-go, you see the kids accept that. No, I know my parents are keeping an eye on things, and. I just think we have to. It's our responsibility, because the risk associated with not keeping an eye on things, the risk is too high in my opinion.
So in that regard, we have two questions that were sent to us by email to Kardec Radio, and one of them is in regard to the very issue that you touched a little bit, which is the cell phone. We have been seeing, and especially this listener mentions that his 10-year-old child is now, claiming a cell phone because a friend got a cell phone because she got lost in the mall. And then parents said, it justifies you having a cell phone. What would you recommend? Because for a 10-year-old, is that proper? With the much that cell phones also expose our children to, as you're saying, it seems simplistic to go and say, okay, keep a cell phone so we'll be in touch with you. But on the other hand, with that new tool in their hand, they can really interact inappropriately. with others. So what would you recommend for parents who really want to discern better about this?
Well, I think the idea that we want our children to be instantly available to us is sort of absurd and is in many ways unhealthy, and that's kind of what we've grown to expect. More and more, I will be in a session with parents, and they might say, "Well, I'll have to take this call because my son's at soccer practice and he's calling," and 99.9% of those calls have nothing to do with anything that's urgent. Even in the urgent moments, there are other people that are there that are really making the calls and making the decisions. Mm-hmm. It's a sort of hypervigilance that's encouraged that really, when you walk through it, it doesn't make any sense. And so I'm not a fan. My opinion, 10-year-old shouldn't have a cell phone in the mall either. If you think about the worst case scenario, which is highly unlikely, that the 10-year-old is now grabbed by somebody who's a stranger and tries to take them out of the mall. Well, how is that going to happen without them throwing a fit? And if they did have a cell phone, mm-hmm. how would they get to it? If we walk ourselves through the kind of worst case scenarios, mm-hmm. we see that it doesn't really fit that these things make a difference. And then why, in these situations, the child starts crying, many caring, appropriate parents and adults are going to be around to say, "Sweetheart, what's going on?" And I'm sure the 10-year-old was quickly located with his parents. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I walk parents through these scenarios all the time. Here's the way I find that it works out. In mm-hmm. part because once they start, if you think of this whole sexting thing, I have a number of clients in the last couple of years where their kids have been caught and continue to kind of go back to this almost an obsession with it. And so the solution has to be to, at some point, remove the cell phone and let them go for a while without it. And over again, of course, the teenager survives. They get through it. Life goes on. And so we have to get out of this mindset, or we become a victim. We become a victim of mainstream thought, which is by and large not taking our children in the direction that mm-hmm. that most mainstream people agree isn't healthy. That's the weird part.
And it's funny you're saying this, because we realize that often parents don't understand that being a parent is being an educator, and being an educator is not second nature as many people think it is. Some features of it are second nature, but others really at human level, at animal level, yes, they are second nature, but at human level, it requires a lot of what we say the neocortex processing, which coaching as you offer. And I really appreciate one of the things that you added in your website. We would recommend to our listeners the newsletter, because it would keep people up to date with not only the latest tips and hints about parenting well, but bringing to their awareness new tools that probably they have never thought about. For example, what you just explained to us, walking parents into the reasoning of the situation before they come to a final decision, and then ruling out the pros and cons. This is something that seems to be common sense, but we would say not quite, because we need sometimes professional help. But before we go to that part, Dr. Cahill, one of the other things that one of our listeners asked about was about something you touched before. We would like, if possible, to talk about it more deeply. The violent video games like Call of Duty. On Facebook, I got to know there is a page on people against Call of Duty, women against Call of Duty, and there are lots of people. There is the beautiful research in Iowa by Dr. Anderson telling quite clearly violent video games will lead to aggressive behavior, period. No doubt about it anymore. It was a very longitudinal study, long term, so they proved So parents like, oh, no, they're just playing. No, they're not just playing. So what would you tell, and if you could tell us about any case and how you approached it, how you gave extra empowerment tools to parents regarding these video games?
Well, first, I want to affirm my read on the research. There's a group of that's really supported by the video game industry. There's some professionals that have written articles kind of claiming that there is no detrimental effect. And to me, I just can't imagine proffering those opinions when the data is so clear. Mm-hmm. What is important to, I think this is my read on that research, is that, particularly for pre-adolescent boys, there is a group of kids, pre-adolescent boys, if we let them have exposure to it, that they might play it a little bit and they walk away. And let's say that's a third of them really are completely disinterested. And then there's another 20% or so that become interested for a while, and then they play it, but their behavior does not seem to be that affected. But there's this 30 to 40% that are profoundly affected, and we can't really predict which 30 or 40% it is. So, if I often ask parents, I use this metaphor to kind of get the point across. If you were out buying apples, and there was a sign above the apples that says 40% of your children will be disabled, become aggressive, and their whole future is put at risk if they eat these apples. But, hey, the other 60% should be okay. How many people would buy the apples? Right? They wouldn't do that. They would say, "Oh, no, I'm not going to put my son at risk." So we have to see it that way. That it's a very real threat, and I've seen it over and over. And I had a fairly recent case. Two parents who are both these parents are attorneys, and there's two boys attended private school, and their oldest, who was 15 at the time, was extremely violent to mom, violent with property, a very bright young man, as evidenced by the fact that he's now on a roll, a student across the board. But at the time, he was C&D student, and he was in the basement doing the Call of Duty online, connected with other folks, using it becomes a very profane, obscene engagement between boys as they play this game. Wow. It's kind of unfortunately, it's kind of the language. When you read the accounts of sort of soldiers on duty in the heat of military battle, the reporter, I forget his name, but he recently wrote a book. He spent a year in Afghanistan. He talks about how there's this level of language that kind of moves to a dark, deep, ugly nature that just becomes commonplace. And that's what you find when you listen to these teenage boys, that they really start to treat each other, and they use a language that is, in my view, it's not healthy, it's not spiritually good, it's not psychologically good, and it's a very aggressive game. They are activated aggressively, and as you probably know, the real thing that shows up as the threat is that the player is in a first position behind the gun, pointing the gun and pointing the weapons and doing the destroy. It's like you're in the position of doing destruction, and you're kind of playing out that role. It's not a third party like a movie view where you're watching this happen. So that first-person experience seems to be greatly associated with acquiring and taking on that aggressive role, and the behavioral correlates that we think of as negative that comes out of this. So that was a long-winded way of saying, yes, I view them as toxic, as poison, and really only suitable for adults, and probably the more aggressive adults who engage it, the research would suggest that it likely encourages aggression there as well, but that's another story. So.
Wow, that's really another story to be addressed. Dr. Kale, now we'd like to give a short break, and we'll be right back with you for our last moments in this conversation about empowering parents for healthy, strong children.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Would you like to liberate yourself from your life struggles or to find inner balance? The Inner Journey CD has 3 beautiful visualizations that will help you bring harmony to your life. As Joanna DeAngeli tells us to, live in a way that you leave enlightening footprints in your pathway as if they were stars pointing out the pathway to happiness. To find the CD, go to the bookstore on the Spiritist Society of Baltimore webpage, www.ssbaltimore.org. That is www.ssbaltimore.org, and start your inner journey today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Save the date for the 6th U.S. Spiritist Symposium that will be held at the Rialto Center for the Arts at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia on Saturday, May 12, 2012. This year's topic is Love and Enlightenment, a Pathway to Self-Healing. Come out and enrich your mind, body, and soul. For more info, go to www.spiritistsymposium.org.
And now we return to our program.
We are here with Dr. Randy Kale in our final moments of conversation about empowering parents. And Dr. Kale, so when do you think parents should recruit professional help, and what kind of help would you suggest?
You know, to me, I would almost encourage anyone that they at least have a consult with somebody who really understands how to manage behavior, children's behavior, how to manage routines, and really kind of gets this whole thing that life doesn't have to be exhausting and overwhelming, that in fact routines can be sort of effortless if done correctly. And I say almost everyone should do that because it's good to be affirmed if you're doing things the right way. And many of the issues that are small that parents are dancing around, and this may be one of the things for them to think about. Anybody who feels like they're dancing around their child's upset or their child's drama or trying to kind of prevent a negative moment or a meltdown or a tantrum, there's a first pointer that you're headed in a serious for serious problems ahead. The second thing I would be is I particularly encourage parents to check their heart and to notice how often does it feel like I'm working harder at their happiness than they are. I'm working harder at them getting an A on their spelling than they are. Mm-hmm. And every time that's happening, we know we're headed down a path that's going to create problems. One of the things I regularly do is I ask parents to just turn on their webcam or their video camera at home and collect a few hours of unfiltered life at home. Mm. And one of the things that does for me and does for them is I get to hear how children are interacting. Mm. And more, and we didn't get to talk about this much, but more and more you have a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, and almost every exchange with mom or dad has a sort of demand attached to it. It doesn't have a sort of easeful, respectful, and not that it needs to. It's not that children need to be. It's not that there's some need for children to be kind of constantly looking up to parents or kind of playing the role of the compliant child. It's not that at all. It's about just a tone that would be more normal, day-to-day, respectful tone. And I hear over and over again, children lack that. So I'd be looking for that. I'd be looking for, does it feel like my son or daughter is speaking to me in the way that they would speak to their teacher, for example? That's always a good indicator because children are, especially in the younger years, are often much worse with their parents than they are with teachers. So we want to kind of notice, is there a disrespect, a negativity, a demand quality where that we keep correcting. So these are all pointers. If children are having multiple tantrums, or what I'd call drama moments, if you have big drama over a small event, you've got a problem. That would be that's another important thing. You can almost determine, that if you've got lots of drama, there are these small moments that produce big emotion. Well, that's never going to be a formula for happiness, or and it isn't that kids grow out of that. They actually grow into it, and it gets worse and worse. So all of these would be sort of pointers to call someone and get some help, or of course, I always encourage people to go to Terrific Parenting or.
Exactly, and there I see, for example, especially for parents who go through divorce, we would also recommend that they get in touch with your newsletter. In your material, you have a specific material for parents who go through divorce, because usually we see, Dr. Cale, that parents are so overwhelmed with the challenges of divorce that they tend to overlook children's emotional setbacks, which may play back onto them in so many ways. And you offer a whole material regarding it, right?
Yes, that book is really the book that was developed starting many years ago, and we refined it over time for a court-ordered program for parents on co-parenting, and it evolved into a more extensive sort of manual. So it really is designed to help parents with the sort of common questions and struggles that put children at risk in a divorce situation. And you absolutely hit the nail on the head. It is often overwhelming, and understandably so. And the tendency is to go soft on children because of it. And in fact, parents should go the opposite direction. They should be firm in their structure and discipline, because that structure provides a relief from the anxiety and worry that children experience. So when we go soft in the midst of life changing in all these other ways, it is actually harmful for children. Mm-hmm. So parents, that's one of the pieces of material that I'm most proud of, because it's very comprehensive and provides a lot of detail. So if parents are going through a divorce, I certainly would encourage them to consider looking at that. I've also got several lengthy articles on kind of guiding parents through that process.
Yes, but when the worst-case scenario really is in front of us, parents will feel so abused sometimes by their either children or teenagers, and they feel like calling it quits and saying, I'm going to turn my child to somebody else's care or, social service. What to do at that very moment? Is it already there's nothing else to be done, or is there something that is still out there for them to be done? What would you recommend?
Well, that sort of decision would be the sort of at the end of your rope and don't know what else to do. And I see that a fair amount. One of the things that I think parents and many professionals I actually find to be kind of a surprise is that in the adolescent years, with a child who is really out of control, the single most useful intervention is not going to be a placement. It's not going to be a special school. It's outdoor adventure-based intervention programs, the sort of outward-bound program that is built for children who are out of control. And there are dozens of programs that are not this sort of hardcore boot camp image that comes to mind, but is really an outdoor adventure-based program that has professionals that are really focused on constantly structuring learning activities, and the whole experience is set up that way. When we look at the research for that particular high-risk adolescent, we see that not medication, not counseling, not family therapy is number one. Number one, and it's not a panacea. Don't get me wrong. It's just more effective than most other strategies. Would be to enroll that child in one of those programs for a month or two, and at the same time, make sure mom and dad get their hands around a better behavior management strategy at home. The difficulty, of course, with a 15, 16-year-old, 14-year-old even who's kind of out of control is that there are things that have been going wrong for many years, and we need to kind of hit a reset button. And I view these sort of placement programs as helping set a reset button for the child or for the adolescent. And then if mom and dad can get on track with a better discipline strategy, I just had a great example of this last spring with two adolescent boys, both in the 14, 15-year-old range, one setting fire, doing property destruction, really kind of, but a very bright young man. And we put him into a placement in Oregon where he had to, at the end of the first month, he wasn't ready, so he stayed another couple of weeks. And parents got their sort of parenting act together, and now this year he is thriving. I mean, he's just performing well academically, no behavioral issues, other than typical teenage stuff. So I view that as, it's the last. I understand it. I get what being there, but I often try to encourage parents to think about these sort of alternative placements combined with really changing things at home, and sometimes that's still not enough, because there's a small group of kids that are very oppositionally inclined, and parents who really struggle to contain their own reactive tendencies. And if the biggest nightmare for me as a professional in terms of trying to achieve success is working with a parent who has a reactive nature and who can't contain that. Because if again, one of those things, if parents are going to react, children react. And two reactions do not make for a better home. It just makes for more dramatic reactions, more emotion, and eventually it becomes violent and ugly in those teenage years. So,
Dr. Randy, we feel so honored, and would like to recommend our listener to really explore the most that they can your website, terrificparenting.com. Sign up for your newsletter. It's such a gift that when we sign up, we receive one of the issues, especially the one that talks about the secret for terrific parenting. And you also do consultations over the phone, right?
Yes, I do phone coaching with parents from all over. I have a fair number of folks from Australia who I do phone coaching with, and current clients in Washington State, and I give pretty much all over. And for this kind of work, as opposed to psychotherapy, for this kind of work, it really is fine. It actually, if anything, it's more effective because you don't. You don't end up getting caught too much in exchanging a lot of niceties and talking about the weather and sort of thing. You just get right to business. And so typically 4 to 6 sessions for most parents. That's it. Very rarely in the coaching world do I need more than 6 sessions for parents to have a completely different home. So, and I love doing that kind of work because it's so rewarding in parents when they start to feel that sense of that where they're feeling powerless because they're working so hard, they're doing all this, putting forth all this energy, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. That's remarkably frustrating. And in a way, it gets back to our opening comment. All their energy is going into trying to control their child, and that doesn't work. And so when I give them the tools to control the home, to control the environment, to control their own behavior, in the interest of a responsible, respectful, cooperative child, and they see that unfold in just a matter of weeks, it's very exciting.
That's so great, Dr. Randy. We really would like to have you here in the future. For now, what would be your final comments for the parents who are out there and probably destroying their hearts for the problems they have at hand?
Well, my final comment would be gentle with yourself, be gentle with your kids in terms of attitude, in terms of because you can hear a message like this, and if it feels like you're off track, the tendency is to start to beat yourself up. Oh my God, I've been doing this wrong. It's so lousy. I've messed up my kids. That will not be of any value. It is never of any value to make yourself feel worse. Instead, view this as an opportunity to see a different, it's like somebody opens a door and you've been in this deep, dark hole and you didn't think there was a way out, and here's a door and there's light up at the end of the tunnel. Focus on the light. Focus on moving in the right direction, and abandon any of what the mind's tendencies will be to critique or to make yourself or to make your children wrong or bad. It's not about that. It's really about understanding that there are tools that can make a difference, and this is the opportunity to take advantage of that.
That's so fulfilling, what you just mentioned to us. We hope that this can be very consoling to many people's hearts, and we really hope even more that you will be available for a future show. Thank you so much, Dr. Cael.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to being back again, so take care now.
Thank you. Yeah, dear listener, this is a beautiful program, a program that gives us so many tools, so many resources. And you may be asking now, what should I do? Well, first of all, share these with other people. Kardec Radio is on demand for everyone. If you missed, or somebody whom you love and you'd like them to listen to the programs, have missed the program, it's easy. Go back to KardecRadio.com, and there we have the live shows recorded and retransmitted at your leisure on demand. Not only there at KardecRadio.com, but at blogtalkradio.com/KardecRadio. All the shows there, more than 40 shows already available to you with a diversity of topics. And not only that, but you can also listen to all the shows through iTunes. Yes, you can. Right now, we're going to the final part of our show with amazing segments by Kirsten DeMello in Spiritist Moment, Dr. Magalhães on Spiritism in Your Lives, and Naur Fonseca and Gabi Ferreira in Got It Home. Hope you enjoy it because they bring the wrap-up of what we've been talking to Dr. Cael with the Spiritist perspective. Something not to miss. Enjoy this, and we'll be back at the end for a final prayerful moment with prayer for a newborn child.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners, and welcome back to the Spiritist Moment. Our discussions today will be about family, children, and education. Well, some say that the birth of modern technology was the death of the family unit as we know it. Well, we seek always to consult the great minds that have come before us, leaving us their divine lantern, one of which is the ennobled spirit, Joana de Angelis, known largely as the spirit guide of the Brazilian Spiritist medium, Divaldo Franco. In her book, Family Constellation, which, by the way, is in English, she states in the introduction that the fall of the family is not caused by the family, but, as she states, the crumbling of ethics and morals as they are victimized in the process of adaptation to the modern times. And she adds, individuals obsess over attainment of distracting things and addicting fetishes enabled by technology. Wow. These statements are not our own, dear listeners, but of Joana de Angelis through the mediumistic hands of Divaldo Franco. And these statements, they chop at the foundation of our educational system within the home. At first, she's saying it's not the family itself that is the cause of their demise, but the very foundation we build our family upon, which be our beliefs, our morals, our ethics, that cause it to fall. So we ask ourselves, Have we really been very conscious of how we are building our family? We sometimes, for example, put a lot of attention into buying a car, a house, or some type of electronic device, and we research and check the market and do everything in our power to obtain and maintain it. But do we really put equally as much interest and intent into our children and raising them? Do we invest in our own family life, our children? With or without children, do we invest in our family life? And secondly, she says that first, due to our poor foundation, we succumb to the conveniences that life presents to us, turning into distractions and addictions even. Well, when we look at addiction rates, not just of drugs and alcohol, but also negative behaviors such as gaming, spending all of our time surfing the web aimlessly with no real higher purpose other than to kill time. How many families deteriorate due to lack of proper vigilance? Because of our addictions of all sorts and our distractions. It's not the vehicle. We're not saying here that computers are evil and that gaming systems are evil. No. What we're saying here is that it serves as a medium of sorts, and the misuse of that particular vehicle or medium is to our own demise if we don't find balance in life, friends. Everything is about balance. And the truth is, Kardec shares with us in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 25, that we humans are given this innate desire to better ourselves. Well, this is quite evident if we look at humanity today. If we look, for example, modern homes today, modern plumbing, something as basic as modern plumbing. 50 plus years ago, there were outhouses. Now, with the advancement, again, going back to what Kardec shares with us in the Gospel According to Spiritism, we have an innate desire to better ourselves, both internally and externally. We seek to make our lives easier. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's all about how we choose to look at it, how we choose to use or, in this case, misuse. But like all journeys, sometimes we veer off the beaten path, and we need to be brought back to the correct path. We need to be steered back on the right course. So education needs and should start in the home with our children, paying close attention to their tendencies, so we can raise them, not for us, but to be good citizens of society. Joanna, in the aforementioned book, also states that we are inherently designed to live in families, to sublimate the self. In other words, to refine ourselves with the help of one another. As she says, yesterday's rejected lover returns as a rebellious daughter, tormented, awakening the father's pity and mercy, diluting herself from all resentment. And she goes on and on. But what does this mean for us? There are many more examples we can use with children in our family constellations, but our family constellations are first, never by chance, even when they occur without prior planning. We learn with Joanna in this book. And secondly, our tools for our own progress are within our own family. Progress for ourselves and progress for others around us. So let us utilize these moments throughout our day to educate our children and one another, taking advantage of our God at Home meetings as well as to promote education for each individual within our home. Our spiritual education is just as important as the education we receive in the intellectual universities and schools. We urge you to reflect and reorganize your life, our family's lives, taking into consideration we are immortal souls and our children are also immortal spirits as well. And as always, dear listeners, we wish you many blessings.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listener. Welcome to the segment Spiritism in Your Life. Today we're going to talk about the Spiritist view on abortion. In the United States, almost 50% of pregnancies are unintended, and almost one-half of them are terminated. Worldwide, we see that about half of the abortions are unsafe abortions that are done without any medical care and have a high risk of medical complications. recent research has pointed out many reasons why women consider abortion. Some of them are listed as having a baby would interfere with family, work, school, or other responsibilities, unable to afford raising a child, do not want to be a single parent, having problems with partner, finding out something is wrong with the baby, and also health problems that make the pregnancy a problem. In other parts of the world, we see sex-selective abortion that is responsible for noticeable disparities between the rates of male and female children in some countries. Induced abortion has long been a source of considerable debate, controversy, and activism. So today we're going to bring to you the Spiritist view on abortion, and we will bring you information that will help clarify some of the most important questions asked regarding abortion. Some of the activists defending abortion use the argument that the fetus is not a living person yet. So to answer that, we'll go to question number 344 of the Spirit's book that says, at what moment does the soul actually join the body? The Spirit answers, the union begins at conception, but is only complete at the moment of birth. From the moment of conception, the spirit designated to inhabit a given body is connected to it by a fluidic tie, which gets tighter and lighter up to the instant the child is born. The newborn's cries announce that it has entered the number of the living and the servants of God. And we now go to the next question, number 358. Is artificial abortion a crime, regardless of the time conception is to occur? The Spirit's answer, a crime is always committed when the law of God is transgressed. The mother or any other person involved always commits a crime upon taking the life of a child before its birth, because it prevents a soul from experiencing the trials for which the unborn's body was to have been the instrument. At this point, many of you might be asking, is there any situation where abortion might be an option? And actually the Spirit's answer that in question number 359. The question is, in cases where the life of a mother would be endangered by the birth of the child, is it a crime to sacrifice the child in order to save the mother? And the Spirit's answer, it is better to sacrifice the being that does not yet exist than the being that already exists. And this idea is widely supported by conventional medicine, and abortion is always an option in high-risk pregnancies and in case of danger to the mother's life. Overall, the Spiritist literature has numerous published accounts of abortions analyzed from the spiritual world, and we can see descriptions in the books Life and Sex, in the book Action and Reaction, or in the book Evolution in Two Worlds. In all these books and in many others, we can see detailed accounts of abortions, and we can also have a feeling of how difficult the situation is, including the tragic consequence to the mother and all the suffering by the incarnating spirit. From a medical point of view, abortion is associated with physical and psychological reactions. The most common emotional reactions after pregnancy termination are a sense of transient guilt, sadness, and sense of loss. And the physical complications may include hemorrhage, uterine perforation, infection, and maternal mortality. Dear friends, as we come to the end, we're here to summarize a message for you. We're not here to judge you. If you've done an abortion or if you're planning to do an abortion, we're here to give information, to support life, especially showing that maternity is one of the most magnificent blessings that God gave us, the chance of giving the opportunity of a spirit to incarnate. And very, very often we have made plans and arrangements, and we have decided to do so. Now, when we come to our physical existence, of course, we're going to be faced with many difficulties, and many times we'll face situations that will make us lean towards doing an abortion. But to remember, the decision is always yours, and you have to keep in mind the consequences of your decisions. Remember the message that Jesus brought to us. Love one another, my friends. God bless you.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Good morning, Kardec Radio listeners. Welcome to God at Home. I am Nauro Fonseca.
And I am Gabi Ferreira. Today we're studying Chapter 7, The Greatest Servant, from the book Jesus in the Home by Spirit Neo Lucio, psychographed by Chico Xavier.
I'd like to invite all 6th graders who are listening to this program today to put on your history thinking caps. As you read the story that was narrated by Jesus, try to imagine how it relates to the history of ancient civilizations.
Philip was at a family meeting at Simon Peter's house and asked Jesus who would be the greatest servant of the Father on earth. Jesus thought for a moment and began telling the story.
A large crowd gathered in a big field when a famous warrior bearing swords and medals came there to give them lessons on military tactics, urging the onlookers to learn how to defend themselves. The people began doing strenuous exercises, leaping and running dangerously about to no real purpose, as they prepared for the possibility of war.
Not long thereafter, a famous politician arrived in the region with a large collection of law codes. He divided the people into various parties, pitting young against old, poor against rich, and servants against stewards. In spite of the sowing of material benefits, as a result of the competition amongst the various groups, the politician went on his way, leaving behind dark thorns of hatred, disappointment, and discord amongst his collaborators.
After the politician came a philosopher carrying volumes of old books under his arm. He divided the people into various schools of thought, which soon gave rise to pointless arguments amongst them. Everyone doubted everything, even their own existence. The philosophy, of course, had remarkable advantages. It did stimulate thinking, but the trouble resulting from it was very regrettable.
Next came a priest, armed with vestments and symbols. He supplied a lot of rules and regulations on how to worship the Father. The people learned to genuflect, to cleanse themselves, and to plead for divine protection at set times. Nonetheless, all the fundamental problems of the community remained the same.
Okay, time to check. Have you noticed any parallels between this story and the history of ancient civilizations? Can you remember the names of great warriors, philosophers, politicians, and religious leaders of the past? What Jesus describes in this short story is how every civilization evolves. Once they stop being nomads and settle, they realize the need to protect their lands from invaders. Soon after, the concept of possession arises, and social and political organizations follow. With the political discourse, philosophers arise, arguing about any and everything, rights, duties, even the existence itself. In the more primitive societies, religion is organized around exterior movements and rituals. So now let's continue this story.
Even after the contributions of all 4 missionaries, there were no real happiness throughout the entire realm. One day, a humble man showed up. He brought no weapons, scriptures, arguments, or symbols. He brought only a spontaneous smile that revealed a mind full of goodwill guiding his industrious hands. He preached no spectacular doctrines. Instead, through gestures of pure and constant kindness, he rendered true worship to the Almighty. He began to make himself known, cultivating a small plot and decorating it with precious fruits and flowers. He worked with wood, planted useful trees, built houses, and set up a modest school. Soon, everyone around him was living in health and peace, fraternity, and the blessings of work, prosperity, and contentment with life. Due to the spirit of work and learning that he instilled, defense was good, politics helpful, philosophy worthwhile, and the priesthood useful.
Throughout history, Christ has sent his missionaries in the areas of industry, science, philosophy, politics, and religion, so that the time would come when we would be able to comprehend the sublime necessity of the law of charity for our divine affection.
Dear parents, if you have children and you worry about filling their every empty hour, provide, if you can, activities that will stimulate their intellectual and athletic abilities. And remember that the best education you can give them is the education of the eternal spirit. So, for example, you may go deeper in your studies of Spiritism in the meetings of God at home or in a Spiritist center. You may also look for community service opportunities in your neighborhood for the entire family. You may begin in this website, www.volunteermatch.org. Combining study with practice is the best way to educate ourselves and our family.
Dear listener, empowered parents truly can make strong, healthy kids. We are here sharing these news, and we hope that you share with others as well. We need one another, as say the spirits in the Spirit's book. Right now, we'd like to remind you that in a week, we're going to come back with the renowned Dr. Stanley Krippner, who will be here to talk about one of his amazing research, which also became a book, Haunted by Combat, Veterans Who Experience Extrasensorial Perception of Spirits in Combat and Their Post-Traumatic Stress Disorders. Quite interesting, quite current. We're a month away from Memorial Day in the United States of America, and we are going to be preparing ourselves to get to know more about this view on these very challenging times of wars. And also, we now invite you to wrap up the show in the highest tone as well. Prayer is a way that we can log in the account and the frequency, the radio station of the high mind of the universe. Connect with our Creator. Thought transmission, as says Allan Kardec. Let us join our thoughts, mind to mind, heart to heart, and pray. Pray, especially with Allan Kardec's instructions in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 28. Beautiful prayers for those who are experiencing the birth of a new child. And let us do it because parenthood is a true mission. God of goodness, since you saw it fit to allow the spirit of this child to come once again, to endure the earthly trials destined to enable you to progress, grant this child your light so that he may learn to acknowledge, love, and worship you. By your omnipotence, enable this soul to regenerate itself in the fount of your divine teachings. Under the guidance of its guardian angel, may its intelligence grow, develop, and make it aspire to draw closer and closer to you. May the knowledge of Spiritism be the shining light that enlightens it to the choices of its life. Finally, may it learn to appreciate the full extent of your love that puts us to the test in order to purify us. Lord, cast a parental eye upon the family to whom you have entrusted this soul. May they understand the importance of their mission and enable good seeds to germinate in this child until the day in which, through its own aspirations, it can ascend by itself to you. Dear God, deign to answer this humble prayer in the name and by the merit of that one who said, "Let the little children come unto me, for the kingdom of heaven is for those who are like them." Dear listener, may we give a virtual hug of gratitude at Dr. Randy Kael and all the people at Kardec Radio Team who have been making this experience a true nourishment for our souls. We wish you many blessings, and may God bless us all.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.